Hello, everybody, and welcome to Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. And I'm your host, BMR. I'm joined by the lovely, the talented Jessica Jones today as my co-host. We got a great show lined up for you. D.A. Roberts joins us in the spirit of Halloween. I know it's October 20th, but we're going to talk a lot of different things today. I can't wait for that. If this is your first time here, please subscribe, give a thumbs up, and hit the alert bell. Share with friends. You can find us on YouTube at Texas Front Porch. You can find us on YouTube at Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. And don't forget Jessica Jones, the Cryptid Huntress on YouTube. In addition, you can find us on Odyssey and iHeartRadio, along with KPNL Radio. Thank you to the lovely Selene for that out there in Oregon. You can find us on where all podcasts are found, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Spreaker. We're also found on Facebook at Texas Front Porch. You can reach us by email at paracryptidencounters@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube to Texas Front Porch, Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, the Cryptid Huntress. Also, if you like, the Super Chat is always open. If you like our content, Super Chat, we'll drop a couple bones. If you don't, share us out. That's just as important as your money. And also, go to our About pages. We've got 5-6 shows per week. There's great descriptions, and certainly something you can find of entertainment value there. I'm going to cut down the music a little bit. I'm going to bring up my lovely Jessica Jones here in a second. Jess, I see you're ready to roll. Hey, Jess.
Hey, Rob.
How's it going? I see you chuckling already. Did I make a mistake already?
No.
1 minute into the... I'm teasing.
I'm just excited to be here today.
You know, I am too, DA. I love DA. He's got a great show. Everybody got to check out DAX Machina on YouTube. Fantastic show. He did a great show last night on vampires and the myths and legends. And of course, that coincided with the show we do. But you know what? All these great podcasts, Jessica, it's always fine to find that time slot. But you know what? We spread the love. We all support each other. And that's what it's all about, eh?
That's right. That's right. You know, I'm going to be doing a show about vampires tomorrow. And Rob, I believe you may be joining me tomorrow.
Yes, so I heard, and I do love vampires.
Yeah, we've got a vampire up in Wisconsin, actually, called the Mineral Point Vampire. And so I've remote viewed that thing. We're going to talk about it.
Awesome. And I see here, you know, Jessica, it seems like every time you're on the show, it doesn't seem like my YouTube is picking up. Oh, well, I got to work with that again, I guess. I don't know.
It's showing on the StreamYard that you're good to go.
It does show on that. It does show on that, but now I'm looking somewhere else. But you know what? Enough of that. We'll figure it out. I'm going to bring up DA. DA, welcome to Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob. How's it going, buddy?
It's going good. Thanks for having me on, man.
You know, anytime. I think this is the second time you've been with us, I do believe, DA.
I think so, yeah.
You know, and it's always a pleasure to have you. You're just a wealth of knowledge. You know, you're an author. You do some research out in the field, and you know, always entertaining and always fruitful whenever we can have you on or watch your channel. Why don't we, talk about your channel a little bit before we get started? Let all the good people know where they can find you to get rolling here.
Sure. Channel's called DAX Machina. You can find it on YouTube. It's actually listed on YouTube as under DA Roberts Author. But we're in the process of trying to get that updated because, we've got YouTube handles now that we can add in. So we're going to be adding that. You can also catch the podcast on Twitch and on Twitter, as well as on Facebook. And we're looking to expand that out here very, very soon into the radio network as well. I've got some projects in the works. I'm not quite ready to announce yet, but we've got a few irons in the fire as it goes. But you can find all of my stuff at daroberts.net. That includes my books, and as well as a link to the podcast.
Oh, new projects. I'm excited to hear what you got going on there.
I'll tell you when we're off the air.
Yeah. Okay.
Not ready to announce it publicly yet.
All right.
Before we get into like Dogman and Bigfoot, I'd like to talk a little bit to start the show about what are your favorite myths about Halloween, DA? And with that, I've got to go figure out something really quick. So I'm going to relieve myself from the broadcast really quickly, not the broadcast, and just talk about the myths of Halloween. And we'll get into it. I'll be back in less than 1 minute.
Okay.
Jess.
All right. We got this, DA.
Well, I've always been a big fan of Halloween. Even as a kid, I loved the costuming and stuff. But then as I got older and started exploring more of the history of it, the Festival of Samhain, which if you look at the way it's spelled Samhain, but I know Gaelic is a very odd language.
Mm-hmm.
Like cheers in Gaelic is spelled Slainte, but it's pronounced Slanja. Gaelic's an interesting language, but the original Festival of Samhain was a time for sacrifice. It was, for preparing for the coming winter, being a sacrifice for the fall harvest that they just received, and there's a lot of dark overtones to it. There were dark entities involved with it. It was the time when the veil was thinnest, and a lot of people wore costumes so the spirits of the dead wouldn't recognize them, and that's how that got started. And the original jack-o'-lanterns weren't carved in pumpkins; they were carved in turnips. And if you look at some of the old ones, they're kind of terrifying looking.
They're a little scary. I've seen them before. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I always worry about Halloween night. We always try to get in from trick-or-treating early before it gets too dark, because we just don't know who's lurking around, and
people are just as dangerous as the spirits.
Yeah. So hide your kids, hide your wife, after it gets too dark on Halloween night.
Yeah, and I got everything running. Thanks, you guys, for that.
I pulled up YouTube on my end, and you're broadcasting fine. So.
Nope, yeah, I got it. It was a little glitch, but it's all worked out. Thanks, you guys. And that happened to me last week. I don't know what happened, but I think maybe it's all in my mind, right? It's the month of October, and I know I asked you about the myths of Halloween. And you were talking about some things. Do you guys remember when you were kids or younger? I remember growing up as a kid. Now Halloween's my second favorite holiday. Then there's Christmas is first, I guess, but. When I was growing up as a kid, my mom was always very frightful because there was a period of maybe 3 or 4 years growing up where when you went trick-or-treating, we had, unfortunately, I live outside of Detroit at the time, and there was a lot of bad apples being passed out. I mean, there was kids they were literally putting like razor blades and poisons and some candy. So it was always fruit we never accepted, which who in the hell wants fruit on Halloween? And if a bag was deflated and they give chips, and who wants chips too? We want the candy. Did you guys growing up during Halloween ever have any of those terrors as a young child?
Yeah. My mom always just wanted to test out the Reese's Buttercups when I was a kid. So the rest of it could have just been poison. Just kidding.
Growing up, we heard those rumors that there were razor blades in the apples and people were poisoning the candy. But I grew up in a predominantly rural area. Okay. It wasn't like, big cities. I mean, even where I live here in Springfield now, when the boys were little, we were a little cautious, and you could take your candy to the local hospitals, and they would X-ray it for free to make sure there was no metal in it or straight pins or anything like that. But we were always pretty cautious about the areas we took our kids. We didn't just go anywhere. So I was usually fairly confident that the candy would be fine. But I've never had a bad experience with something. And if it was questionable, like if it was only partially wrapped, we just chucked it.
Yeah, same here. I grew up in a small town too. And so we went to Hart Circle. It was the name of a street that we would go to every year. Because I grew up on a farm. I didn't have neighbors. Okay.
My grandmother for Halloween, we would always go trick or treat her, but she would for several days leading up to Halloween, she would make homemade caramel apples and great big caramel popcorn balls. And the kids that lived around her just freaking loved going to her house because they were all homemade and they were so good. But that's one thing I do miss. Remember my childhood because she passed away when I was still a younger man. But I do miss those. I used to tell her all the time, just in case she wanted to pull a prank on somebody, to make one of those caramel apples and onion, but she never did it. Just so some random kid's like, "Oh, caramel apple!" Oh,
that's terrible.
Yeah,
that would have been me.
A treat, not a treat.
I never did get the caramel apple in the bag, and again, it was a little paranoid for a couple of years growing up. Then that kind of did go away, and I never had anything happen. Very few reports of atrocities going on Halloween. But I tell you what, my favorite when we got a little bit older, we used to go into the rich neighborhoods, and my favorite thing was getting the oversized, giant size Three
Oh yeah.
Musketeers. They're like 8 inches long, and you
Yeah,
just
there were
love.
people that in some of the neighborhoods we went to that would get full size candy bars, and my boys would just go nuts.
Yeah.
And so it's a great time, and I grew up and I love it. As I said, my second favorite holiday. But enough of the Halloween talk, Da. What have you been doing recently out in the field, or any cool experiences going on? Because I know you're in the Ozarks,
Mhm.
and I always get that connotation that the Ozarks is very mysterious. And if there's anything recently that you've come across that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, we most recently, our most recent outing was kind of a different one for me. I'm usually a cryptid guy, but I've been hearing all these reports from people about a haunted cemetery. It dates back to the Civil War. It's called the Union Campground Cemetery, and it basically became a cemetery right after the Battle of Wilson's Creek. It's a little off the beaten path. It's not something that even everybody knows where it's at. I had no idea it was there until it was pointed out to me. But we went out there and shot some video and spent a couple hours in that cemetery. And we had some really odd experiences. And one gravestone kept showing up on EMF. I kept getting a reading from one particular gravestone. And the first thing that we noticed about that when we walked in was just this pervasive feeling of loneliness. I would say a good 80% of the graves were unknown.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
So many graves that they had marked gravestones, but maybe they had no idea who was buried there.
Do you think it was from soldiers?
Oh yeah,
definitely.
Yeah. There are reports of people that have been scratched there. There have been reports of people that have been shoved. I didn't have anything like that, but we did have a really odd feeling like we were being watched. And at one point I heard something like crunching leaves, and we didn't get it on camera. The camera didn't pick it up. We were filming. The weird thing is I've never had this happen before. I've never had this happen since. But every time I tried to film with my cell phone camera, it would say it would give me an error message that the phone was too hot. It was heated up completely. When I went to take out my little digital recorder to try to do EMF, I had put brand new batteries in it just before heading out there, and it's like a 5-minute drive. It was dead. I couldn't get it to fire up. Just a lot of really odd, when you add them all up, really a lot of odd circumstances. But we didn't actually see anything. It was more of a feeling. But we are planning on going back out there. I've got to get special permission from the county board to be out there after dark, because they're not allowed. People aren't allowed back there once it gets dark. But it's a really overwhelmingly eerie area, and it's a place I definitely want to get back to soon.
Wow. Are there reports of any other activity out there as far as like Sasquatch or UFOs?
It's not too far from a couple places that have had Sasquatch sightings. It's outside of Springfield if you're heading north toward Fairgrove, and out near Fairgrove have been several sightings, and it's not far. It could easily, there could easily be some overlapping of possible cryptids, and that's kind of what I thought when I heard something crunch the leaves. I thought something was watching us from the woods. But my son said he felt like it was inside the graveyard with us. It's hard to say whether it was a physical force or if it was something moving, but you can definitely feel the presence in that cemetery. I mean, I don't consider myself, any kind of psychic. And I know, Jessica, you say everybody's got a little bit of psychic ability, but I've never really felt that. I mean, I've had a couple of odd experiences where I've dealt with paranormal stuff, even as a cop, but I generally don't get that feeling.
Yeah.
And it was just all encompassing. I mean, it just felt lonely, and it felt sad, like overwhelming loneliness and sadness once you walk in that cemetery, and you just can't shake it.
And That does sound very creepy, DA. And I did want to ask, because you had made mention about overheating of the cell phone,
Mhm.
and we all hear those stories, overheating of cell phones, or again, you can't take a good picture, or your equipment, the battery fails.
My son's camera worked just fine, but my phone would not function.
Wow. In in regards to these situations, do you think that maybe that is an energy that's been given off by the spirits around these cemeteries, especially?
I think it's an attempt to, because we all know that ghosts and spiritual entities operate within electromagnetic field.
Hmm.
They draw energy, and I think that's what was happening, because my recorder went dead, my phone was malfunctioning. I charged it fully. I made sure the phone was fully charged before we left the house, so I would have plenty of battery to film. And when I got home, it was at about 20%. But I think something was using that energy, and it wasn't long after that when we started hearing like the movement and stuff.
And in regards to cemeteries, it brings up something that I was thinking about. You've all heard about the rake, right?
Mhm.
In my opinion, I like to get your thoughts on this. I don't know if I've ever heard your opinion on the rake. I always thought it was like a ghoul that goes about cemeteries and literally steals or tries to break in and seek cadavers, right? And
Mhm.
am I off the wall with that, or what was your take on the rakes? I know that's a question that everybody has, and everyone's got different ideas or opinions on it. What's
I,
your thoughts?
I think the rake is a type of Wendigo. I think it is perpetually hungry, and if it's seen in or around cemeteries, it's looking for an easy food source. I think it is some type of variant of Wendigo, perhaps a nature spirit a spirit of hunger.
Wow.
Again, that's just my opinion. I
Well,
mean,
no, and
based on the physical descriptions of the rake and the descriptions of Wendigo, the description that people always think of with the deer skull and
yes,
the antlers, I think it's wearing that skull like a mask, because a lot of like the Algonquin descriptions of Wendigo, they describe it as being very thin, very pale, very gaunt, and having like cadaver like features where it chewed its own lips off and the flesh from its fingers.
Oh,
So it's
wow.
very, when you think of the Wendigo descriptions without the what most people think of, the headdress, the deer skull, when you hear those descriptions, it's very similar to the rake.
Wow. That's wild. That sounds really creepy, actually.
yeah,
We've had an encounter with something that was out in the field at one point. This is a while back, and the only way we could describe it, the head of my team called it a hungry ghost. Okay, kind of sounds similar to what you're talking about a little
But
bit.
that's exactly what the
Yeah,
Wendigo is.
yeah.
It's basically the spirit of hunger, and it tends to
Wow.
affix itself to people who have committed like huge cultural taboos, like cannibalism. In fact, in the Swift Runner case, the last known case that was prosecuted in Canada, it was a human who had basically murdered his entire family and eaten them. He claimed that they were starving and they were out of food, and his family had died from starvation. But when they went back to check, it was obvious they'd been fed upon. And of course, Swift Runner himself didn't look like he'd missed any meals, so it made him suspect. Not only that, he was only a couple miles from a trading post, so even if the winter had been, really really harsh, which it had been had been a bad winter, he was still close enough. He could have made it to the trading post with snowshoes. So when they went and checked, he'd eaten his family. And there's another case, they refer to it as Wendigo psychosis, and I'm sure you guys probably heard about this. This would have been around 1998, somewhere between 98 and 2002, where a guy was on a bus on the Trans-Canada highway, and just for whatever reason, he just attacked and killed the guy in the seat next to him and started eating him. And when they captured the guy, he had chunks of the guy's flesh carved out and put in Ziploc bags to eat later. The guy didn't go to prison. They described it as Wendigo psychosis. He went to a mental institution, and when I checked up on the story, he was released, I think, in 2016.
wow. I've often
Oh,
heard too.
Yeah, he's out.
wow.
He's out. Okay, great. I'll make sure to look him up.
Oh my gosh.
When you hear,
That's why I lock my doors at night
you
No
know, I
kidding.
you got
and in the day.
And two, DA, too, at the Wendigo, you're talking about the flesh eating and such.
Mhm.
Now, I had heard that the Wendigo was derived was like a person was cast by was cast out by a tribe. They put a hex on them that made them thirst for hunger, and primarily from their own families. And in order to break the hex, you had to, in fact, eat a member of your family. Did you hear anything about that? Or are we talking about something totally different here?
I think that might be a variation on the legend. When I did the research for my book, Curse of the Wendigo, I started digging into a lot of the lore and different Native American tribes, primarily the Canadian, near the Canadian American border, the northern tribes. They had slightly different versions of the legend. Some called it the Wendigo, others called it the Wentico, the Wendiga. There are several different versions, but they basically describe the same creature. They even had different ways that you were supposed to be able to have to kill it. One version was you had to carve its heart out with a silver knife and burn the body and the heart separately. Then there was another was a decapitation, but a lot of them involved fire. But the most common adaptation of the Wendigo is somebody that has consumed human flesh and became cursed by the Wendigo. And I think the spirit of the Wendigo is an elder demon. I think it's basically like the spirit of starvation, the spirit of hunger, because while reports of Wendigo being put down have been reported, the spirit of the Wendigo continues to live on. So I don't think they can actually kill the elder spirit itself. They're just killing the manifestations. And Wendigos have been seen in the lower 48, in the lower 48 more recently. There were sightings in Colorado and some in the Appalachian Mountains.
Wow. Yeah. This is something I'm not familiar with. I was actually going to ask terrifying. It's terrifying. I was going to ask you about the Wendigo on Sunday. I know you're coming on Spaced Out Radio with me, so I'm going to talk to you about this some more too, because I don't know the first thing about the Wendigo. So I'm
Wendigo.
Now
I don't know if you can. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say that now, knowing that the head of my team was like, well, I don't know what that scream was. It was I know what it was. It was a hungry ghost. He had a name for it, actually.
If you hear the
I'm
scream,
looking at that differently.
If you hear a scream that has kind of a multi-tone to it.
Oh, it was in my base camp, actually. Something came at us in our base camp behind our tents, and it screamed really, really loud. And it was something I've never heard before. It was like not an animal, not a human. It was something that I've heard Bigfoot scream. This wasn't anything like any of that.
A lot of cryptid researchers will lump Wendigo in with that, but it's not really a cryptid. It's more of a supernatural entity. Yeah. I've dug into it quite a bit. Like, for example, a lot of the Native American lore involving the Wendigo say never whistle in the woods at night. Wendigo is a mimic. It can mimic the voices of people to try to draw you in. And even the sounds of babies crying in the woods, they will try to draw you out there and cut you off.
Oh my God. That's terrifying. Yeah. And we've all heard about that, with the baby crying deal.
Well, if you hear your name being called in the woods, don't answer.
Don't go. I'm not going.
Yeah, so geez. No, I don't think I would. If my name was called out in the woods, and I'm just going to tell you right now, I'm turning around, I'm leaving. I really
another big thing is even William Nighthawk and I talked about this together. Don't whistle in the woods. There was an account of a Wendigo attack in southern Illinois about 15-20 years ago, where a girl, I say girl, she was in her early 20s. She lived in a wooded area, and she let her dog outside to go to the bathroom, and it took off. Well, she was trying to get the dog to come back, so she started whistling. And shortly after she started whistling, the dog come barreling out of the woods at full speed, scared to death. Well, this thing comes out of the woods, and she ran in the house and locked her doors. And for several nights, it would come out of the woods and circle her house and stay there until dawn. And she finally had to have a shaman from a neighboring tribe come drive it away because it had fixated on her because she was whistling.
Jeez. And now we don't have, now the Wendigo, we can't whistle, but also as Duke points out, the Gugwe and mountain giants also
Oh
could
yeah.
be. So we got three.
Well, they will whistle at you,
no-nos.
but what the Native Americans say is that you should not whistle. I'm sure the Wendigo are capable of making the whistling sound, and Gugwe and mountain giants will definitely make that kind of noise. But the Native American warning is, if you're in the woods at night, don't whistle. You're going to get the attention of something you don't want.
I'm not whistling anymore.
Yeah,
I don't think I ever did.
I never could whistle very good anyway. So
I was always pretty good at it, but I went out I live in town, and I went out in the backyard the other day because my idiot dog was taking forever, and I went, oh crap, I probably shouldn't do that.
Oh my God, you stopped mid whistle.
Yeah, I was like, oh, all right, moron, get in here.
Oh my gosh. DA, have you been back to the Joe Bald recreation area?
I'm planning on going out there. I was waiting. Well, after you and I talked, you were talking about something possibly underground, and I'm waiting for all the leaves to fall so I can look for vents.
Yeah.
I'm planning on going back out there. I want to spend, I've got a group of guys that are going to go with me because after you and I, our last conversation, I've decided going out there by myself is probably not the brightest of ideas. And I know, and something I've said on my show many times is not to go out alone. Well, I don't practice what I preach. I've gone out by myself so many times, but now that I've slowed down a few steps, I'm like, hey, maybe I ought to take somebody that can help me shoot. So I'm putting together a group of guys, and we're going to go try to spend as much time as we can before we get chased out of there, because the Stone County deputies will come down there and go, "What the hell are you doing down here? Get out here!"
Awesome. That's
and
awesome.
I'm still waiting for the opportunity to get into that one campground I told you called Coombs Ferry. Mm-hmm. The weird thing about Joe Bald is they shut it down back about 25 years ago, and the Army Corps of Engineers will not let it open back up. You can still get in there. The road still goes in there, but they will come in there and chase you out of there if they realize you're down there. However, Coombs Ferry is another campground just across the lake that they shut down, but I don't know what happened over there. I can't find any information about it, just that it was shut down, and they went to the additional shutdown of taking a bulldozer and bulldozing off the entrance. And this is Table Rock Lake, where a half acre of land can cost you between $150,000 and $200,000 just for the land. So the Army Corps of Engineers has shut off access to close to, I'd say, 250 acres of prime real estate right on the lake with no explanation.
What do they do? Make a berm or something? Where you
they bulldoze the berm. I hear if you've got a good enough 4-wheel drive, you can still get in there. But my little SUV ain't going to make it.
You can go overland over it, huh?
Yeah, or you can get to it by lake. But I've got to find somebody with a boat so we can get in there.
Wow. Well, it makes it a little more suspicious now.
Yeah. Why would they go to the trouble of bulldozing it off if they had nothing to hide?
It sounds suspicious.
Very suspicious. And we're talking about the Wendigo being more of a spiritual entity, right, DA? And we also talk about shapeshifters, where I get the impression it's more of a human, right? That maybe, again, we talk about curses, and where a person gets a curse, and then they can turn all sorts of forms, animals, what have you. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think that, again, that's another curse passed down, or a hex from legend?
I think that may be more of a skinwalker. Okay. And again, I don't consider myself an expert on this, and anybody that claims to be an expert on this is probably selling you something. I'm a big proponent. There are no experts in this field. All we have is theories, and everybody out there's got their own theories, and they can do their own research, and their theory is just as valid as anything I've come up with.
And quickly too, before you continue on, again, the purpose behind this show is I talk to hundreds of people now, it seems like, and I always ask the same questions because everybody's got their different opinions and ideas. And what I enjoy about is collecting the data, putting it down, and I've got a database of everybody's what they've talked about. I go back in some of these shows and I actually compile everything, and I see how everything varies and how everything differs. And again, you're right, there are no experts. I just really enjoy what people's thought processes are to help everybody get through these things. So absolutely, DA, and please continue on.
Well, that's one of the reasons I try to keep as much of a record as I can of accounts, like not just sighting reports, but encounter stories. Because when you look at the encounter stories, and this applies to everything across the board, be it paranormal, be it cryptids, being it supernatural creatures like the Wendigo. When you compile these accounts, you look for the similarities in those accounts, and those similarities is what allows us to build behavior profiles so we can study the creatures more in depth. And I think it's going to be doing that kind of forensic analysis where you look for the preponderance of evidence on any one particular behavior that's going to allow us to learn more about these creatures. I don't think the government's ever going to come forward and go, oh yeah, these things exist. But I think there will be a point where at least we can come to a common understanding of what these behaviors truly are and what exists across the board. Because you'll get difference in geographical locations, like the skunk ape has different characteristics in the Pacific Northwest Bigfoot, but they also have similarities, and it's those similarities that's going to allow us to start tracking these things. Same thing with the Wendigo. If you look across the spectrum of different tribal accounts, there are lots of different bits of lore that are put in there, especially when it concerns ways of killing them or certain behaviors. But there are also a lot of commonalities. And like the reference you were talking to about a person being cursed, that sounds to me more like Skinwalker than Wendigo, because that it generally involves pretty dark magic in somebody that's been cast out.
Absolutely. And I think the shapeshifter though too, I think is a curse that's been placed on somebody.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it's kind of like we're talking maybe werewolf, right?
Right. Well, the Skinwalker can take any form. Yeah, it can shape change into anything. Whereas your werewolf has, basically human and werewolf. And Wendigo, it doesn't really shapeshift, as more of devolve. Once it's become that gaunt, emaciated thing, there's no going back. At that point, it is purely corrupted. It is what it is.
Yes, it develops into that, and that's that.
Right. And the only way to put it into it is to put it down.
And you were talking with the silver, from you've heard, right? The silver spears cut out the heart.
Yeah, how do you put it down? That's my question.
Yeah, what I came to for the conclusion of my book, and I write primarily fiction, so take that with a grain of salt, because it was a fictional story. But what I ultimately came to the conclusion of was that since pretty much every legend I could find involved fire in some capacity, the team I have, the Team Odin, they switched to incendiary rounds and did a number on it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and fire, that always, whenever I think fire, I think something evil going on, right?
Right. Fire is the ultimate purifier.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like in classic vampire mythology, like we were talking about last night. Silver didn't affect it. They were able to come out during the day. Most of the stuff that we think of as vampire lore is actually made up by Hollywood. Yes. True vampires, the original lore, the only way to kill them was beheading and burning.
Wow. Yeah, and you find all those old, coffins that have steel or iron, rods over their chest, so like they can't get out of the casket.
Spikes driven through them, nailing them to the bottom of the coffin. Rocks shoved into their mouths, as in the case of the vampires that were found in Ireland. There were lots of different things that they believe now were vampire. Were vampire bodies that have been buried. I mean, through Romania, through a lot of the Slavic nations, they have found very similar cases like this, where they had been dug up, beheaded, in a lot of cases burned, and the ones that weren't were either dismembered or had spikes driven through joints to pin them into the coffin, and in some cases, huge stones placed on top of them.
It's funny you bring that up. I was watching some documentary. I think it might have been Bulgaria or Romania, where they were unearthing coffins. And sure enough, a lot of these cadavers, or what was left of them, right? Or just a skeleton, they had, many of them had stakes like driven through the heart area. And a lot of these, the skulls had pointed teeth. There was rocks over the coffin. And then, of course, you have, now I'm thinking in my head vampire, and then the scientists are saying that, well, the pointed teeth was just recessions. They didn't have a really good explanation for the stakes through the heart. I think it was just to keep them from moving. They said from moving about in the coffin, which I don't buy that. And I tell you, it was pretty creepy. I'm not so sure that actual vampires existed. I'd like to believe so, because growing up as a kid, that was my go-to growing up. I used to watch, I think the very first vampire movie was my dad showed me. It was a Bela Lugosi, right?
Oh, great movie.
Jonathan Harker in that book, and I read Bram Stoker as a kid. I don't know how I got through it. That was just fascinating to me. And so, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think the vampire monster myth lore? Your opinion on that?
Well, every myth or legend has some basis in reality.
Yes.
Something caused that legend to spring to life. But if you look at the sheer number of cases down through the centuries, of course, you've got Bram Stoker, basically turned Vlad Tepes into the most famous vampire, although he may never have actually been a vampire. He was certainly a brutal guy who impaled bodies, but he may not have been a true vampire. Then you've got Anne Bathory, the blood countess. She bathed in human blood because she thought it kept her young, and was believed to have fed on it as well. You've got these cases of odd occurrences like that down through the centuries. Of course, you've got these remote villages where people would stake the bodies into the ground, like you were saying. I think there's more to it than just myth. There's got to be something that originated this legend. In Egyptian mythology, they believe Sekhmet was the first vampire. If you look at Judeo-Christian, they believe Lilith, the first wife of Adam, became the first vampire. So there's vampire lore dating back centuries in every culture. Different types of creatures that feed on human blood. And whether you believe them to be myth or whether you believe them to be real, there are vampire covens around the world. Whether you believe they're real vampires or not, they're out there.
Yes.
And they do feed on human blood. Now, in a lot of cases, they have what they refer to as donors who will donate blood. But look how many people go missing every year. And I'm not just talking the missing 411. According to NAM US, 600,000 people are reported missing each year. And that's not counting the number of people who don't get reported.
That's right.
Undocumented people or homeless. If there was a true vampire living among us, the perfect place for them to hide would be in plain sight and to hunt at the fringes of society where people just don't get reported missing.
That's right. Like homeless camps and things like that. And you got to also think about places like the Cannibal Club. I think it's in LA or New York, where they eat human body parts and meat. It's a delicacy.
And that's not just here. That there's still cannibal tribes around the world. I mean, Borneo, in the Amazon basin, there are tribes that do today practice on human cannibalism. Tribes in Africa, like in the Congo basin, cannibalism is still alive and well around the world, whether people want to believe it or not. We like to think that we're the masters of all we survey and we know everything about this world we live in, but we really don't. We've only scratched the surface.
Yeah. Well, the Cannibal Club is just for rich people.
I don't know where that would get fun.
Yeah, I don't know. The very rich are really,
really weird.
I can keep them away from me because they're worse than a vampire.
I don't want to be part of that club.
They say that human they refer to it as long pork, that it cooks very much like pork. So I guess if you got some salt and pepper and Cavenders, you could make it edible.
Ugh.
Well, back
little Tony Chachere's.
It's funny you mentioned that.
Tony Chachere's.
I put that on everything.
It's funny.
Little Lowry's on it.
Yeah, it's funny. Human pork. We're talking about vampires. Vlad the Impaler, who people say was Dracula. Well, I was disappointing because I know he wasn't an actual Dracula, but legend has from Romania where he was always covered in blood, and what he did, he impaled his victory, he took all the bodies and impaled them on stakes, right? And for to scare off his enemies and set fires around them. And it was, however, rumored that, he would sit there and eat these corpses rotting on these impaled spears just to scare off and ward off other countries and troops from invading him. And that's really where he gained his infamy and was one of the top warriors of that time.
I don't think it's an accident that Bram Stoker used his name.
Yes,
I don't think it's an accident at all. Of course, there was the legend around him being a bloodthirsty, savage opponent. It never, like you were saying, there were rumors that he did eat flesh or even drink the blood. Dracul means dragon, and Dracula means the son of the dragon. However, you got to take into account that Bram Stoker was Irish, and in Irish Gaelic, Dracula means bad blood.
Yes.
Wow, I didn't know that. It's pretty neat.
Really neat. I can talk vampires all day. I got to rewatch your show last night. DA had a show last night. I haven't seen the whole thing. I go check it out after this. On vampire lore, I can just really get into it all day long, and I know Jessica's into it too, and just fascinating, especially this time of year.
Oh yeah, it is Halloween. Well, I think of like reptilians and stuff like that when I think of, Vlad and I don't know, just that whole thing.
Do you think the reptilian aliens were visiting us even then?
They were probably, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I would think so.
I mean, even the Bible.
I don't know a lot about them, but
the Bible in Ezekiel, the wheel, basically it sounds like a UFO, a wheel within the wheel in the sky. Yeah. That to me sounds like a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Again, I'm no scholar, but that just when I hear that, I immediately thought UFO. I mean.
We did a show on that several months ago about that exact same thing, and that's where we kind of, our conclusion, one of them was anyways, flying saucer, UFO, alien activity.
Well, look at Stargate SG-1, and I know that's science fiction, but I'm just pointing that out as an example, how they basically used the conclusion that every culture that had believed in gods, that they were just aliens that had been visiting their culture and had taken on those iconic roles. Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology, they even dealt with like Central American deities at one point. Like as the expression goes, any technology sufficiently advanced appears as magic to those who don't understand it. So, very easily could explain why, our ancestors believed these all-powerful beings from the heavens or Valhalla or Asgard or, whatever other world they wanted to call it, possess these incredible abilities that humans couldn't mimic because they believed it to be powerful magic. Whereas it could have been, as SG-1 put it, it could have just been significantly advanced technology, and they took on those personas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
I'm not saying that's the fact. I mean, that's just me tossing that out there.
I mean, I can agree with that. Absolutely.
It makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense. Just like, you go back to ancient Egypt and technology. And I'm not talking the pyramids, but I'm talking like how we have depictions on walls, engravings of, Anubis or a dog on a man's head, or things that look to be UFOs or alien, like stick figures with big heads. There's somebody is doing this purposely way back in Egypt. I mean, they're carving this out by hand with their tools because they've seen something and they want to tell a story for the future, right? And they're not going to sit here and make these things up, in my opinion, because that's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of bloody fingers goes into that. I believe today a lot of things from the past was things in the future progressing towards our future, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, the ancient Egyptians had a primitive battery.
Yes.
We know that they were able to do things like that. We also know that, certain constellations at certain time of the year are visible from the viewport of the Great Pyramid at Cheops. However, there's also the subject of the Pyrrhic map. The Pyrrhic map was discovered by the Greeks, and they didn't know what it was. They couldn't figure out what this map was of. Well, the United States Navy, I think it was in 1972, started doing advanced sonar soundings of Antarctica, and they discovered that the Pyrrhic map was a map of Antarctica without ice on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually was looking into organism 46B, which is
what they found. Was it Lake Baikal or something? Baikal?
Yeah, I believe that was the name of it. Yeah, up in Antarctica, and that actually came up in my data. We talked about there's also another creature, like a cryptid that's aquatic, that's up there in Antarctica, that I was making the connection with this organism 46B, and it's called the Ninjin. So something similar. Yeah, they're just these gigantic white sea creatures, and they're actually very ancient. So
the thing is what people fail to realize is even now, ships that sail the oceans follow specific trade routes. There are huge sections of the ocean that ships just don't cross. Yeah. And we know less about the bottoms of our own ocean than we do about the surface of Mars. I mean, we have only explored, I think it's less than 5% of the ocean. So there's no way scientists can say they know everything that's down there. For example, when they put that camera down at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, a shark swam by it, and you can see part of it on the camera. They estimated to be over 60 feet long because you can see the gill slits in it. We don't know what's down there, and until we've explored all of the ocean, how can we claim we're masters of our own planet? Another great example is you look at Google Earth. If you look at Google Earth of specifically North America, I'm not talking about the rest of the planet. You just look at Google Earth of specifically North America and do the satellite version, not the map version. Mm-hmm. There are millions upon millions of acres of unbroken green. Places even here in the Ozarks that probably haven't seen like human in 100 years, if ever. Then you've got places in northern Canada and Alaska where no human has probably ever set foot. So how can we claim we know every animal?
Yeah.
And you bring up the oceans, which we had a show last night. We were talking the differences, or what is a siren versus a mermaid. Talking about the ocean. We're talking about sirens. They're making the beautiful sounds, the whistles or the sounds of birds, and the sailors would follow these beautiful sounds, which ultimately led them to their deaths, right? Mm-hmm. Basically, they hit a rocky shoreline, drowned, and these were sirens that were half human, half bird. And I really didn't know much about that until last night. Then you've got the mermaid, right, which is half woman, half fish, right? Mm-hmm. And we're trying to make the determination between the difference, but they all are come about during different centuries, or different. Like one was during the mythology, which was the siren, and the mermaid was more current, because mermaids were all both feared and loved by pirates, right? Some mm-hmm. pirates used it for power to go getting their gold, and some stayed away because some of these mermaids took them to their deaths along with the sirens, which was very interesting. I found last night.
Yeah, there are a lot of things in the ocean when you start looking at some of the old mm-hmm. legends that we're discovering, very well might be true. Like forever, we heard the old sea stories of the Kraken, of giant squid attacking ships, and everybody's like, "Oh, the giant squid's a myth," and then they captured him on camera. I think it was Doug Hychek from Monster Quest who developed a camera that caught it on camera first.
Wow.
But it's we know for a fact the giant squid exists, and we don't even know how big they can actually get. They're estimating. I mean, they're taking a guess now, but that's the perfect case of a cryptid that got proven to be real. Another great example of a cryptid that turned out to be real was the billy ape. Out of the region of the Congo came the story of the killer ape. And Western science is like, as I like to joke about the British Museum, oh no, that couldn't possibly exist, until about 20 years ago when National Geographic caught this thing on camera. The locals had been talking about it for years, so this is an ape that kills lions, and they're like, that doesn't happen. But then they discovered the billy ape, and it's like a much bigger version of an eastern lowland chimp. It walks primarily on two legs, is about 6 feet tall, and is extremely aggressive. They have now found out that these things will make war on each other. And they're tool users. They spend a lot of time on their walking upright like humans, and they have hunted and killed lions. So scratch that one off the cryptid list. And so if we've got in Africa an upright ape that's using tools and hunting people and hunting lions, how big of a stretch of the imagination to think that there might be an upright ape on the North American continent? Even Jane Goodall says that she believes it's a possibility.
Wow.
You know, that's funny. Gosh, D, I was watching some. This is several months ago, and it was late at night, and I was kind of half asleep. I was watching something. It was a YouTube video where I believe it was in Africa. It was in the jungle, and literally they looked like big apes, and they had spears in their hands, handmade spears, and they used them like a human being, and they were spearing fish.
There's probably footage of the billy ape.
Wow. Yeah.
You can Google that. It's BILI. They're from the Billy region of the Congo. And National Geographic captured them on camera. Up until then, Western science was like, nah, we don't believe that exists, until it was much like the mountain gorilla. You know, Western science in the 1800s was like, oh no, the gorilla's a myth. It's just native folklore. There's no such thing as a gorilla. And then boom, they bring one in and drop it on the desk. I'm like, I guess it does exist. I get to name it.
Yeah, no doubt. Well,
unfortunately, that's the way science has always worked. Like, for example, the coelacanth. Like, that thing's been extinct for millions of years. Oh yeah, then why are the people off Madagascar eating them?
You know, Dia, we're coming up on our 52-minute break. For everybody out there listening on iHeart and Odyssey Radio, we got to cut you loose. However, you can catch the second half. Subscribe to Texas Front Porch and or Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, to catch the second half with D.A. Roberts. And for the people leaving us, D.A., on the radio side, why don't you once again tell them where they can find you?
Sure, absolutely. You can check out my podcast on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook. It's called DAX Machina. And you can find my podcast and all of my writing at daroberts.net.
Thanks for that, D.A. We will be back in 5.
Four minutes to go, folks. 4 minutes. Three minutes. We're almost there. 2-minute warning, guys. 2-minute warning. One minute. 1 minute.
Hello. I don't know what happened there. Hey, I got to do a flip flop. Thank you, everybody, for joining the show. D.A. Roberts, always phenomenal when he's on the show. Really quickly, before we get into the second half, I want to talk a little Dogman with D.A., but
Sure.
remember,
I've
Monday.
got my NADP sweatshirt on today, so
Awesome. Oh, great. We'll have to talk about the NADP. Don't forget, everybody, subscribe to Texas Front Porch, Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, Jessica Jones, Cryptid Huntress, and, of course, DA. Mondays, Texas Front Porch airs 7:30 in the East. Tuesdays, my new show, Beyond BMR, 9 in the East. Wednesdays, Jason McLean Questions Everything, 10 in the East. Thursdays, right here, Brunch with Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, and my co-host until the new year, Jessica Jones. It's 12. It's 1 in the East. And tonight, the Serial Papers with Jason McLean. That's also in 10 in the East. And the lovely Jessica Jones, Remote Viewing Investigations, 9 in the East. I'll be with her tomorrow. And Jessica also has a new show that she debuted a couple weeks, maybe a month ago during the daytime. Jessica, if you want to go ahead and plug yourself really quickly for everybody, let them know where you're at.
Yeah, well, on my channel, the Cryptid Huntress, I do a show. I've been calling it a glitch in the Matrix, but it's just the Cryptid Hunter show on Wednesdays at noon and noon Eastern. So it's going to be in the morning for some of y'all out there, and in the night for some other of y'all. So, but anyways, I have a show on Spaced Out Radio too. So y'all join me this weekend. D8 will be my guest on Sunday, and let's see, Jeremiah Fountain will be my guest on Saturday.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Good weekend.
Awesome, Justin. Thank you. And also beyondbmr@gmail.com. I do take folks' encounter stories that I do read on my channel. That's pretty successful. So if you guys have an encounter, you want to be anonymous, send it on over and I'll read it for you. I've got about 20 in queue. And I do appreciate we do appreciate the super chats. We appreciate your support. More importantly, hit that alert bell, share us out, because it's wonderful to keep us rolling. We do this for you guys outside of ourselves, and it's just a great time. And thank you to everybody in chat. If I didn't say hi to you, don't mean I don't see you in chat. I still got to configure how to type, talk, and listen all at the same time. And let me tell you something. It's art. It's an artwork that I've yet to totally master, but we'll get in there.
It's multitasking.
It's multitasking at its
Yes.
best.
I had to learn how to do it too.
I tell you. I forgot. I even forget
fun.
how to add pictures sometimes. But hey, it's a process, like anything else. Anything worthwhile is a process. And DA, back with you. Thanks for joining us once again. Awesome show. And let's get into a little bit of Dogman. again, for those that don't know maybe about you, I don't see why they wouldn't. You're all over and you provide great content. Have you had a dogman encounter in your career? And of course, talk a little bit about the NADP.
Okay. I'm the Region 2 director of the North American Dogman Project. I got involved with the NADP after an event that happened here in Missouri. Jessica's well aware of it. It's we refer to it as the Joe Bald incident. I'm a writer. I was researching a book called The Lakeview Man. And some of the scenes in the book took place in that old abandoned campground. It's always been something that's kind of fascinated me, why it was shut down all those years ago. But we went down there to shoot a promo video, and the intent was just to shoot a couple of minute video just to introduce people to the area, show the park a little bit. My best friend Steve and I and my wife and his wife jumped in my minivan and we went down there. Like it was well after dark. It was probably around 9 p.m. and just went down there on a lark and decided we were going to shoot this promo video. I get home, go to upload the video, and I'm like looking at the video as it's uploading and watching it, and start noticing, like you'll see in my background. Granted, this is an animated background; it's not from the video. It's just something I had somebody make. My buddy Adam Shepard made it for me, but you'll see eyes popping up in the background. That I kind of noticed that on the video. I'm like, I'm getting a lot of eye shine, but this is Missouri in the woods. You know, you get eye shine. It could be raccoons. It could be just about anything. So, seeing eye shine in the woods is nothing that terrifies me because I've seen it all my life. So I didn't think anything more of it. Uploaded it and posted it on my YouTube channel. Year and a half later, we were discussing that promo video on a show I used to do called The Nightmare Hunter, and we showed the video. And one of the guys in the audience, a guy named Tom Whitney, he said, "Hey, I don't want to freak you out, but I saw something move behind that tree behind you." I'm like, "No, there was no. I've watched this video 100 times. I've never seen anything move in it." So he's like, "No, I'm telling you, something moved." So I watched the video a few more times, and I'm looking at the area, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe. So I sent the video to a couple of guys I know that do video analysis, and what they brought out of that grainy cell phone video was pretty freaking terrifying. There are several frames where you can see it moving. You specifically see it moving, so it's not something just like pareidolia. It's not you're not seeing a bush because it's moving. We went back out to the exact spot, found the tree, and measured it to be about 9.5 feet off the ground. But you can clearly see as my flashlight's passing back, you can see the hand and claws and the head of what looks to be a very large dog or wolf. It's very wolf-like in its features. The video's on my YouTube. We did a whole breakdown of it called the Joe Bald breakdown video. But in this video, in these stills they brought out, you can very clearly see this thing. I even sent the video to MK Davis, and he's like, "I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I can tell you there's something back there because it's moving independently of the background. There was no wind. It wasn't like the bushes were moving, and there's no bushes behind that tree. So there's nothing that it could have been." Yes, we have black bears in Missouri, but I've never seen a 9.5 foot tall one. And if it had been something that had climbed the tree, you would not have seen its entire shoulder and head dip out behind that tree and come back around. You might have seen its head come around, but if it leaned out that far, it would have fallen. The spacing between the arm and the head were too far for it to be a black bear. So we pretty much ruled that out. It wasn't cat-like, so there was no way it was a mountain lion. And if there was somebody out there hoaxing us, they did a pretty poor job of it because we didn't see it for a year and a half. If there was somebody, and at the time I was still an active cop, and my buddy Steve's a concealed carrier. So if it had been somebody that was going to pop out in a werewolf mask and go, probably would have got smoked. I mean, we were both armed. I would have put enough lead in it would have passed for a pencil. We didn't see it, and that's the really bad part because I'm a trained observer. I'm a lifelong deer hunter. I was a cop for the better part of 20 years. I'm a trained observer, and I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. I didn't even know it was there until we got pointed out in the video. So we definitely caught something on camera. And when I sent that video to Nick Valente from the North American Dogman Project, that's how I got involved with North American Dogman. Is Nick watched that video and he said that is probably the best example of a type 3 Dogman that I have ever seen. He said, and furthermore, I think there were more than one in your area because those things move in packs. He said, probably a good idea you got out of there when you did because you were about to be surrounded. So that got me kind of involved with NADP and started. We did a field investigation with Nick. Nick and I spent a better part of a week in LBL and actually had a sighting there last year. So I've got involved pretty actively with the NADP, and they offered me the spot as the Midwest director. So I'm in charge of pretty much everything in the Midwest, which oddly enough, the bulk of sightings that the NADP has collected come from the Midwest. Because we've got, Beast of Bray Road, we've got the Michigan Dogman, all of that falls into the Midwest region. And LBL is just outside of the Midwest region. So the bulk of Dogman sightings seem to be coming from the Midwest part of the United States.
Wow, DA, I just looked into the Beast of Bray Road a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
That video has gotten about 2,000 views on Texas Front Porch alone already,
nice.
Which is a lot for my shows. And it's gotten almost 1,000 on my channel. But there's not just one Beast of Bray Road, DA. There's multiple Beasts of Bray Road. There's a bunch of them out there. It's not just one.
Well, if you look back at let's say the Patterson-Gimlin footage, most recently, I think it was in the last 5 years or so, the FBI released their documents on that investigation because the FBI did an investigation on the sighting from Patterson-Gimlin film, and even though the document is highly redacted, they blacked out certain portions of it. The conclusion of the document says that they found significant evidence to prove the existence of this creature, but they believed it to be dead. The FBI is admitting there was enough evidence to prove that thing was out there. So there's no impossible to say it's just one. Same thing with Bray Road. It can't be just one. People have been seeing it for a long, long time. There's no way it's just one creature. There has to be a breeding population of these things, which means for every one we see, God knows how many we don't.
Exactly.
Yeah, and to me it just makes sense, Jessica, too, and DA, like the Beast of Bray Road. Yes, the Beast of Bray Road was spun up, and of course a book was written about it, Linda Godfrey. But even myself, and that was way back. What was that, in the 80s, DA, when that came out?
I believe it was. I can't remember the exact year, but Linda's been in digging into this. There's even a song about the beast.
It was the 90s, by the way. It was the 90s.
It was the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay.
They made a song in Michigan about that. It was a disc jockey, I do believe, too, a jingle. And yeah, to your point, both of you guys, there's the Beast of Bray Road. Okay, I got it. But there is more than one Dogman, much like there's more than one Bigfoot. And throughout all these years, there has to be a population because, there are certain parts of Wisconsin. And if you look further into it, there's just as many there's a lot of activity over there, including Bigfoot.
Right. Well, up there, especially you get to the Upper Peninsula area, you get some pretty serious sighting reports, even Wendigo sightings up in that area. So when you get these areas of woods that are that dense,
yes,
and that you've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of acres of prime real estate for these things to be for an habitat. And I know guys that have been deer hunters their entire life, like, I never saw anything, I don't believe in that. And then you run into a deer hunter who was a lifelong deer hunter and said, I didn't believe in these things until I was in my deer stand and saw one through my scope. And those are the guys that, one of two things happens. Either they become avid Bigfooters because they want to know more, or they're like, nope, I'm out. And I've talked to guys that have done both. In fact, I talked to a cop, and I promised him I would never tell his name, but this was down near the Missouri-Arkansas border. He was deer hunting in a deer stand and dozed off in his tree stand. He had his soft-sided cooler lunchbox with a strap around his leg so it wouldn't drop. And he woke up to something tugging on his lunchbox. And he opened his eyes, and he said he was about 12 feet off the ground, and said the thing that was tugging on his lunchbox was a Bigfoot, and its head was about level with his knee. I said, what'd you do? He said, I gave it the damn lunchbox. What do you think I did? And he said, I said, what happened then? He goes, well, it walked off with the lunchbox, and I waited until I knew it was gone. I climbed down out of that deer stand, and I got the hell out of there. And I said, have you ever go back? He's like, hell no, I didn't go back. I sold my deer hunting equipment. If you want that deer stand, I'll tell you where it's at, but I'm not going back.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a lifelong deer hunter. He's like, nope, Not going back out there. I'm done.
I know. That's why my team we found a couple of or a few abandoned campsites out in the middle of the woods. People just up and left. Stuff had been sitting out for a while. You can find some pretty good camping equipment out in those woods if you go searching, because people will get up and run out in the middle of the night and never come back.
There was a similar story like that I took from some guys. He said back when he was in college here in Missouri, that him and some of his buddies from one of the local universities got together and were going to go go camping out in the Mark Twain National Forest. And they got out there and got set up and everything. And being college guys, they were doing what college guys do. They're sitting around a campfire getting drunk. Well, at one point, he'd been drinking enough. He decided he needed to go relieve himself. So he walks out of camp about 20 yards, finds a tree to lean against, and proceeds to start doing his business. He said, well, at some point, he thought one of his buddies was tossing pine cones at him from behind a big bush about 20 yards away. He kept getting hit with these pine cones. He's like, knock it off, assholes. I'm trying to take a leak. Well, he gets done, goes back into camp, and all his buddies are there. He's like, how did you guys beat me back? He said, which one of you idiots was out there throwing pine cones at me? They're like, none of us. We didn't leave camp. He's like, I'm telling you, one of you jackasses was out there throwing pine cones at me. And they're like, no, none of us left camp. So he takes them back out there, finds the exact tree because it's the puddle, and the bush is gone.
Wow.
The entire bush is gone.
Yeah, that wasn't a bush.
Nope.
No bush. And DA, you're talking about the Upper Peninsula of Michigan here, and there are a lot of American natives or Indians and First Nations throughout the entire up north. In fact, it's probably most of the populace. And finally, I'm going to go with my brother. I got a quick little story about up north, the Upper Peninsula. Finally, my brother, who's an avid hunter over 20 years, and he knows about my Bigfoot encounter, and he's on board. He's on board. And now when he goes hunting, in fact, he's been hunting now the last several weeks. He's now looking for, not only is he looking for deer, but now he's kind of, being more cognizant, right? He's looking for tracks and tree breaks and maybe listening for other sounds that he never paid attention to. But he wants to go with me. We want to take a trip up north. Years ago when we were kids, DA and Jessica, my mom and dad would always rent a cabin. We were maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 years old. We went for like 3-4 years in a row. And this cabin that we were in up north, it was in Hessel, Michigan, off of the Lake Chanel Islands. Very dense, very thick, and right off Lake Huron. And our bedroom of this cabin had a big bay window, and it always faced the moon. So it served as our night light as kids, because at night, we were still, we needed some light on, but the moon, if there was a full moon, did not need it. So every night, it seemed like right after midnight, me and my brother would be sitting in our bedroom, and we'd be talking, and again, the moon's illuminating the room. You can see. And for many weekends, like the Friday, Saturday, Sunday trips that we would take, right around, I guess it was dark, midnight, there would always be a shadow that would come into play. It would literally walk and go from one side of the window to the other, and it would totally blacken the entire room. And it kind of had a shape, couldn't make it out. In fact, at one time I thought maybe we were dreaming or seeing something, and it would shade out the room for 5, 4. We would count back. I remember this as clear as day. We would start counting backwards from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then all of a sudden the shadow would drift off, and the room would be illuminated again. And this would happen every year we went up there, at least once a night, during the week that we were there. Thought nothing really of it, never told our parents. We weren't scared. But now, since having an encounter, talking to the people that I talk to on a daily basis, I'm probably guessing, and I'm just guessing, my opinion, that was probably something. And to shade out the entire room consistently like that.
Had to be pretty big.
It was pretty big.
What do you think it was?
Today I think maybe it was a Bigfoot. Again, the shadow might have been cast bigger, but it would blacken out the moon. And again, 5, 6, 7 years old. And all the reports and all the sightings that supposedly happened in the Upper Peninsula, Had to be a Bigfoot. Now, it could have been a cryptid of some sort, and it could have been our imagination as kids. But now that I'm more open-minded than I was, 5 years ago, I'm going to put my money on a Sasquatch.
Now, I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because I'm in the camp. You probably had probably a Bigfoot either standing outside your window or walking slowly past it.
Yes,
but you're certain it wasn't just a cloud.
D, it could have been a cloud.
Generally, you still get some illumination even with a cloud. You don't get that complete shadow. Yeah. What I'm doing is just looking at logical things that we can eliminate.
Yeah, awesome. I appreciate that, and I will say this: the entire room went black. I mean,
it wasn't a cloud. You would have had partial illumination even from a cloud.
Yep.
So you had something physically blocking the light from your window. How big was the window?
It was a bay window. If I can recall, it was probably, I would say, 5.5 feet long. You know how the bay window comes out? It's like a half moon, maybe about 5 feet wide, and it was probably stood maybe 4 foot.
So whatever was blocking the light was considerably sized. Yeah, that wouldn't be a cloud. You had something that was broad standing in front of that.
And I'm wondering if it stood far away to block out the moon or if it was right up on the window. That's the only thing I'm trying to.
I would say if it was farther away, it wouldn't have blocked out all the light.
Okay.
It had to have been right up by the window.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it was, but that's
where
my sense is.
Kind of terrifying that the only thing separating you from something that big was a quarter inch of glass.
Very, very, very much so. But it happened consistently when we went up there, and it happened. We would spend 5 to 7 days, something like that. It happened like 2 or 3 times throughout the week, but we went there 3 consecutive years in a row, and every single year that would happen. So it was consistent. And I know it wasn't my dad because the next morning he'd been laughing, saying, "Hey, did I scare you guys?" So it wasn't him.
Yeah. You said that was in the Upper Peninsula?
Yeah, Hessel, Michigan.
I would say something was walking by checking on you. How many stories have we got over the years of Bigfoot peeking in on kids?
Quite a bit.
It's very curious about human kids. And then, of course, you've got a lot of lore about it abducting small children as well, and even adults. So, I don't know if it was, if it was interested because you might have been on the menu, or if it was just drawn to the presence of kids. But I think you had a nocturnal visitor.
And I'm a very strong advocate for curtains and blinds on
Absolutely.
windows. Okay, because I know when I was a kid. No, my parents put lace curtains on our windows, and I lived on a farm out in the middle of the country. We had no neighbors, we had no one close by, but I felt like I was being watched at night through those curtains. So, I have pictures that someone sent me about a year ago of aliens looking into someone's house. It was a family here in Georgia, and the kids were possibly being abducted and all that kind of stuff. And there's very clearly alien faces looking in their windows. And so I'm like, why don't they just put curtains up? They'll solve that problem. I don't know if you can get rid of the aliens, but at least you can close the curtains.
When I was a kid and we lived on a farm, and I'm talking young kid, 3 in that ballpark. And I know a lot of people say, kids that small don't have memories. I do have memories of when I was that young. And one particularly vivid memory was my parents refusing to let me sleep in my own room for about a week because as they told me as a child that young, they said that there was a screech owl that was hanging out outside my window. And it wasn't until years later that it dawned on me there was no trees outside that window. It was just an open yard. So I've often wondered what my parents were hiding from me. But both of them are gone now. And of course I haven't had a chance. I didn't get a chance to ask either of them about it, but it's always stuck in my head that for a solid week, they had me sleep on a pallet next to their bed by them, and wouldn't let me sleep in my own bed, which was just down the hall. But I had a good sized window, and back then in the summertime, we didn't have central heat and air. This was in the early 70s. You slept with your window open with a fan. And it always struck me odd that they wouldn't let me sleep in my own room because of a screech owl. That I don't remember ever seeing an owl.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I used to get scared when I was a kid, and I'd make my own pallet by my parents' bed. go lay down in there. But to have your parents do that, they were protecting you from something.
Yeah, I wish I had the presence of mind to ask them, but I lost my mom when I was still pretty young, and Dad and I we weren't on the best of terms when my dad passed away, so we'll just leave it at that. But I never got a chance to ask either of them, and I would very much have liked to have, because I think there was something going on there. Because we would hear stuff in the woods behind our house, because we had a big field behind our house, and we had an orchard where we grew apples and pears, and we had a big garden. And my grandparents would always insist that they plant like pumpkins and squash and stuff at the back of the field that we never touched. But at certain times of the year, Dad would say, "Hey, we need to get out there and get the apples we want, because if you waited too long, you'd go out and every one of them would be gone." And they would say it was deer eating the apples, but I guarantee you there wasn't a deer in the top of that apple tree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That we would come out and the trees would be picked bare.
You might have had some Bigfoots.
I think we did. That area is. Well, and now it's all housing developments. That farm I grew up on is a housing development now, which just breaks my heart. But that whole area, that was pretty woolly country back in those days.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we talked a little bit of Dogman. I said a little bit about my possible Bigfoot up north. DA, yourself, any sightings or experiences with an actual Bigfoot throughout your time out in the field?
Well, I've come close. I don't think I've ever actually had a sighting, unless it was something I wasn't certain of. But I on my Uncle Buddy's land, which is out in the middle of nowhere, he had about 160 acres, right up about 5,000 acres of conservation land, and he didn't allow anybody but family to hunt on his land. I had one incident when I was in a deer stand, and I heard something approaching me on two legs, and I thought it was my uncle. And I called out. I said, "Hey, who's back there?" And it stopped. And I was in a pretty good sized tree, and I couldn't just lean out and look around. I hear it stop, and it kind of did something like this. I hear a deep breath, like, and then I hear it turn and walk off. And by the time I got down out of the tree stand and got around the tree, it was gone. I could see impressions in the leaf litter where it had been, but it was long gone. And I probably would have taken the shot. I mean, I was carrying a British 303 at the time, and I probably would have taken the shot. The next season on that same section of land, but I'd moved the deer stand to a different spot. I was waiting for a good buck. I'd passed up on a couple small ones and a few does, but I was waiting for a good buck, and I finally found one that I thought was trophy worthy. Like, get this one mounted, probably around 12 points. And I was hunting again with that same British 303. It's right over here behind me. I took a shot and hit it, and it went down. And by the time I got down out of the tree and headed over there, it had gotten up and staggered off. But on the ground was a bloody spot, a large bloody spot with lung tissue, what hunters refer to as lung butter. I knew I'd got it good. It wasn't going far. So I start tracking it, and I'm finally finding big drops of blood, not little bitty ones. I'm finding a significant amount of blood. So I know it's not going far. Well, it made it to a ravine that dropped down into a dry stream bed, and it jumped down. Well, it was too far for me to drop. It was 20, 25 feet down. And I could see where it had hit and collapsed. I could see it. It was down there, and it was done. So I backtracked down this ravine. It took me probably 20, 30 minutes to find a spot that was low enough for me to get down. And by the time I get back up to the spot, I could see the crushed down leaves. I can see a lot of blood. So I know this thing had bled out, but it was gone. So I start spiraling out as far as I can go in every direction, and I can't find another drop of blood. I don't find a track because I'm in a rocky stream bed and there's leaf litter. I don't find any tracks. So I was carrying a Motorola radio, and I got on the radio and called my uncle. I said, "Hey, I think somebody's out here on your land. I think somebody's somebody's out here because they stole my deer. He said, where are you at? And I told him where I was at. And he said, you know, you're not supposed to be on that section of land. That was a section of land that was close to the conservation land he didn't want us hunting on. I said, yeah, but I was tracking my deer and this is where it went. He said, there's no person out there. You're not going to find that deer. And if you keep following it, we're not going to find you. Get out of there.
Wow.
So I got back to the house, and of course, you know, my uncle Buddy he married my mother's sisters. He was my uncle by marriage, but he was full blood Cherokee. And I thank him for most of what I know about cryptids and how to track animals and things like that. He taught me a hell of a lot. And he told me many times he'd seen Bigfoot on that land, and there were certain parts of the land to stay the heck out of.
Wow, DA. You know, gosh, I hate, you know, this resonates with me with something. I normally don't like talking about my experiences, but as I made mention, my brother's into the Bigfoot thing now, especially as he watches my show, we talk about it. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, I'll make this quick. I know Jessica got pipe out of here in a minute, but my brother's hunting. He's in his tree stand. He lines up a deer. Takes aim. He hits it. He goes to track this thing. This is like a couple of years ago. He tracks this deer through the woods. And all of a sudden, the trail goes dead. But where the trail goes dead, DA, is this. It stops at a base of this wide tree. And he sees where the deer had fallen because he could see the outline. There was blood there. Now he's looking around. He didn't hear any four-wheelers, didn't see any four-wheeling tracks. He didn't hear other people. And he's thinking nobody dragging it out of here. There was no drag marks. Again, no four-wheelers, no sound or sight of human beings or human presence. But he's looking, where did the deer go? Because that's where the blood stopped. So he's looking down. And all of a sudden, DA looks at the base of this tree where it had fallen, and he looks up this tree, and about 8 to 9 feet up, it looked like it was smeared in blood all the way up. But he says the weird thing, Rob, the blood trail ended there about 8 feet up, and he's looking up in these trees, and there's a whole bunch of trees all about itself. Gone. Never found the deer or anything. He says to me, Rob, you think maybe a Bigfoot did that? And I'm like, man, it was pretty strange. I mean, I'm of the opinion of Bigfoot. I don't think a Bigfoot took I'll ask you, 8 feet up the blood. I don't think a Bigfoot swings from trees to trees like a monkey. They're too big. I don't think that the branches could hold them unless it's juvenile, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But man, to this day, I can't say yes or no on that. I mean, other than a portal? I don't know. What do you think?
It's possible that it was a mountain lion. Mountain lions do drag their kills up in trees, but he would have found it. It wouldn't have. The mountain lion's not going to, like you said, jump tree to tree. If there was blood 8 feet up, he would have found that deer tucked into the crook of a tree, or the mountain lion itself up there feeding on it. And same in my case, I didn't find drag marks. Nobody had picked it up. This was a solid deer, and I was a good sized country kid at the time. I wouldn't have been able to drag that thing out of there without gutting it. It was a good sized deer. I was wondering how I was going to get it out of that ravine. So yeah, you got these things very similar to mine. I think, I think it was probably a juvenile took it up a tree and then went branch to branch. And I think despite their weight, I think larger Bigfoot are capable of doing that too if they're hitting large enough branches. If there's an oak tree in my backyard, I guarantee I could pull the engine block out of any size truck you want to name on that branch. I could probably lift the entire front end off the ground of a truck without putting too much weight on that branch. It's thick. And some of these older oaks like that and older walnuts, they can support a lot of weight. I think it's something that I think it was taken, and I don't think it was much. And just like in my case, it wasn't coyotes. Coyotes leave a mess. Coyotes would have eaten it right there on the ground. There would have been tufts of fur and blood and chunks of bone. There would have been debris. Wolves, again, would have eaten it on the spot or dragged it short distance away, and there would have been a mess. And they don't. And you can't. Wolves and coyotes don't eat something in a matter of minutes. Mountain lion would have dragged it up the tree, but it would have been there.
Yeah,
so I think
Yeah.
I think it's something more along the lines of a Bigfoot that took it away, or possibly a Dogman. You are in Dogman territory, and Dogmen will go tree to tree.
Yeah, it's very good. That's kind of my conclusion too. And I think we're gonna end it there, DA. It's been an hour and a half. It's been such a pleasure, man. I love God, I could talk with you for hours. I do have some things to do. We normally keep the show an hour and a half, and I appreciate it very much, DA. Again, where can we find you, and what you got going on?
I've always got books in the works. I just released one called Man's Marauders: A Planet Too Far. It's the first in a sci-fi series. Just before that, I'd released the 5th installment of my Apex Predator series called Apex Predator Dark Moon. It's set in LBL. Hope you guys will check those out. You can find all my books at daroberts.net. You'll also find links to my podcast there, which is called DAX Machina. And I hope you guys will check it out. We generally run every Wednesday and Saturday nights. So I hope you guys will pop over there and give us a like, share, and subscribe. And make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this channel and to Jessica's, because they've got some amazing content.
Thank you.
D, I certainly appreciate that. I appreciate you. And I appreciate Jessica. She's got to go get her child.
I do. I'm going to be late.
Go ahead, take off, Jessica. I appreciate everybody in chat listening today, listening later. D.A. Roberts, go check him out. I love the guy. Wonderful show. To everybody, BMR. Until next time, we are out.
Bye, y'all.